Hilary Benn.
Thank you very much indeed. McCabe, the question in this debate is a very simple one. What has been the impact of leaving the European Union? And I was much struck reading the government's response to this petition, which I thought was really quite dismissive and defensive. In essence, it said it was a democratic decision, so there's nothing to look into here. Nothing's happening. Now, of course, it was a democratic decision. It has been made, and we remain, with one exception, two exceptions, we lost. And the point that was made by the Honourable Member for Gravesham about sovereignty, I met many people during the campaign who made that argument. Indeed, they said, I don't care about the economic impact, my sovereignty is more important. And I respect people's right to hold that view. I fundamentally disagree with it. But what I think was unforgivable was to claim that we could have all our sovereignty, keep all the benefits of being members of the European Union, and get further benefits on top of that. It simply wasn't true. And we now know that it wasn't true. And therefore, those who argued for us to leave the European Union are now in a state of confusion and denial. That is what is going on, particularly about the economic consequences. And if we don't understand what they are, how on earth are we going to build a new, but different relationship with our European colleagues over the months and the years ahead? And it is interesting that there's a number of members here today with whom I had the pleasure of serving on the UK Trade and Business Commission, reference to which has already been made, because we felt it was important to ask that question. And then you let the evidence speak for itself. And if people want to come to before the Commission, say it's wonderful, look at these opportunities, I'd love to hear them. There haven't been that many who have, in fact, done that. And the truth is, it's had a bad impact on the economy. I was really struck by that statistic, which showed that the number of small businesses actually trading goods with the European Union declined by 1/3 between 2020 and 2021. Now, not entirely surprising, because it's small businesses that most find it difficult to cope with the burden, cost, bureaucracy and red tape. Brexit was never sold as, it was sold as getting rid of cost, bureaucracy and red tape. It's dumped the biggest load of those three things on British businesses we've seen in our lifetime. We're going to be the worst performing large economy in the world this year. Business investment as a percentage of GDP has stalled since the referendum in the UK. And it is worth just reminding ourselves what the Office for Budget Responsibility said. And I quote, "It will result in the UK's trade intensity being 15% lower in the long run than if the UK had remained in the EU, and the latest evidence suggests that Brexit has had a significant adverse impact on UK trade via reducing both overall trade volumes and the number of trading relationships between UK and EU firms." And ironically, while all of these costs have been imposed on British companies exporting, the government hasn't yet introduced full checks on goods coming into the United Kingdom from the European Union. Why hasn't it done that? Because it's afraid about shortages and delays. So the sovereignty that has been gained is not being used to apply the same checks going one way as we are facing going the other way. The trade deals have been referred to. I was very struck when the former Environment Secretary, the member for Camborne and Redruth, described the Australia agreement as being actually not a very good deal because we've given far too much away. We all know that that's the case. And the promised trade deal with the United States of America, the biggest argument we heard, absolutely nowhere to be seen. It's not happening. It's not coming. And the fundamental truth is, if you make trade with your biggest trading partner more difficult, which is what we've done, then don't be surprised if it has an adverse effect on the British economy at a time when we need all the growth we can get to help our constituents. And we've heard about employers finding it hard to get workers. I was very struck when we visited, as the Commission, the fruit farm in Kent. And the owner of that said, last year I couldn't pick 8% of my crop because I couldn't find enough workers. And do you know what I'm doing this year? I'm planting less crop and I'm going to import more fruit from the rest of the world. What a wonderful advert for the growth of the British economy, that is the conclusion that farmer was for. I will give way, yes.
Looking at these issues as a member of the Shadow DEFRA team, it's really ironic that what we're finding is that we're having less UK production and more import directly from the EU, which actually is a negative impact of Brexit rather than the positive impact of us being able to trade out. So it's exactly the opposite of the claims and exactly why we need to have something like this.
Well, indeed, that is the case. If you make it more difficult for your businesses, and we want as much export opportunity as possible, don't be surprised if it damages people. And the other irony about sovereignty is the government said we're going to use our sovereignty to introduce a British version of the REACH chemicals regulation. Now, they've just postponed it for the second time, not least because the British chemical industry has said, you know, it's going to cost us about £2 billion for absolutely no purpose whatsoever to get back to where we were when we originally got our chemicals assessed under REACH. The UK CA mark, which is meant to replace the CE mark you find on the bottom of lots of goods that are made, the government's postponed that again because a lot of British businesses say, what is the point of doing this? What is the point? And on the retained law bill, which is an artificial mechanism to try and force through changes to retained EU law, I remain of the view, despite the concerns that have been expressed, that by the end of the year, we will still be in alignment with a lot of EU law, partly because we argued for a lot of it in the first place. You know, it wasn't imposed upon us. We were part of the decision-making process, and because a cost comes to the economy from diverging from the rules that are applied by our biggest trading partners. And the fact is, every company that is exporting to Europe, well, they're going to make their goods to the standards set by Europe, whatever the British government thinks, because that's what you do if you want to continue to trade. And it is really striking that those who argued so strongly for these benefits, no upsides, no downsides, only upsides, all of those quotes that come back, I think, now to haunt those who made them, they find it very difficult to know what to say, so they try and blame Remainers. It's like all revolutionaries, if I may use the analogy. When the revolution doesn't quite work out, they say, but comrade, it was not applied with sufficient vigour and purity. An argument that some members in the chamber may be more familiar with than others. And the truth is that, and this is the hard part of this debate, is we cannot simply reverse what has happened. It is very striking that when I look at not the governing party, but the major other parties represented in the House, with the exception of the SNP, who want another referendum for another purpose, none of those parties are saying we should have a referendum after the next election to see whether the British people want to change their minds. Because you can't reverse it just like that. And we know that. I looked at the words. The Green Party say, rejoin as soon as the political situation is favourable and the right terms are available. I think that's an interesting observation. The Lib Dems, as I understand their current position, rejoin the single market once the ties of trust and friendship are renewed. And the truth is we're going to have to build a new but a different relationship with the European Union. It's going to take time. Who knows what it will look like? Who knows what this country will look like in 10 or 20 or 30 years? But in order to do that, we have to be honest about the effect that this change has had on our country and our economy. And that is why this question needs to be asked.